Vincent Lawson had seen it all. At least, that's what he believed. For 17 years, he had worked as the head vocal coach at one of the most respected music academies in the city. His students had gone on to win awards, sign major record deals, and perform on stages that most people only dream about. He had an ear for talent, a reputation for excellence, and very little patience for people who wasted his time. Every few months, the academy held open auditions. It was a tradition that Vincent had grown tired of years ago. Most of the people who walked through those doors had big dreams but very little to back them up. They watched too many talent shows on television and thought that passion alone was enough. Vincent knew better. Real talent was rare. It didn't walk in off the street wearing worn-out shoes and clutching a piece of paper with song lyrics scribbled on it. But the academy believed in giving everyone a chance. So Vincent sat through audition after audition, listening to people who couldn't hold a note, people who tried too hard, and people who clearly had no business being there. He gave each person exactly 90 seconds. If they didn't impress him by then, they never would. On that particular Tuesday afternoon, Vincent was already in a bad mood. The morning auditions had been a disaster. One young man had forgotten the words to his own song. A woman in her 20s had burst into tears halfway through her performance. Another had shown up late, reeking of cigarettes, and argued with the staff about the rules. By the time the lunch break ended, Vincent was ready to cancel the rest of the day. Then she walked in. She was a woman somewhere in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. It was hard to tell. Her face carried the kind of tiredness that comes from years of hard work and little rest. She wore a simple gray cardigan that had seen better days, and her dark hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She carried no fancy portfolio, no headshots, no evidence of any professional training, just a folded piece of paper in her hands that she kept smoothing out nervously. Her name was Rosalie. That's all Vincent knew about her when she stepped up to the small stage at the front of the room. He didn't bother looking at her application. He had already made up his mind. Vincent glanced at the two assistant coaches sitting beside him. One of them, a younger woman who had only been with the academy for a year, raised her eyebrows slightly. The other, a man who had worked with Vincent for over a decade, simply shrugged. They all knew the type. Small-town dreamer. Probably worked a dead-end job and spent her nights watching videos of famous singers, imagining herself in their place. There was nothing wrong with dreams, of course, but this was not the place for fantasies. This was a serious institution. Rosalie stood at the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. She looked out at the small panel of judges and swallowed hard. For a moment, Vincent almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But he had learned long ago that pity didn't help anyone. The music industry was brutal. If she couldn't handle 3 people staring at her in a small room, she would never survive a real stage. "Whenever you're ready," Vincent said, his voice flat. He didn't even try to sound encouraging. He checked his watch. 90 seconds. That was all she would get. Rosalie nodded. She took a deep breath. Then another. The silence stretched out, and Vincent felt his patience wearing thin. He was just about to tell her to start or step aside when she opened her mouth, and everything changed. The first note that came out of her was unlike anything Vincent had heard in years. It was soft at first, almost fragile, like a whisper carried on the wind. But there was something underneath it, something powerful, something real. It caught him off guard, and for the first time in a very long time, he forgot to look at his watch. Rosalie was singing an old song, something Vincent vaguely recognized from his childhood. It was the kind of song that grandmothers hummed while cooking dinner, the kind that got passed down through generations without anyone remembering where it came from. In the hands of most singers, it would have sounded dated, even boring. But in her voice, it became something else entirely. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. It filled the room, wrapping around everyone in it like a warm blanket on a cold night. There was pain in it, but also hope. There was struggle, but also strength. It was the voice of someone who had lived, who had suffered, who had kept going even when everything told her to stop. Vincent sat frozen in his chair. The pen he had been holding slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. But he didn't notice. He couldn't take his eyes off her. This woman, this ordinary-looking woman in her faded cardigan, was producing sounds that most trained professionals could only dream of. The young assistant coach beside him had stopped breathing. Her hand was pressed over her mouth, and her eyes were glistening with tears. The other coach, the veteran who had heard thousands of auditions over the years, was leaning forward in his seat, his expression one of complete disbelief. Rosalie didn't seem to notice any of this. Her eyes were closed now, and she was lost in the music. She wasn't performing for them anymore. She was somewhere else entirely, in a place where the song meant something deeper than any of them could understand. When she reached the final note, she held it for what felt like an eternity. It hung in the air, pure and perfect, before fading into silence. Then she opened her eyes, looked at the panel, and did something that broke Vincent's heart a little. She apologized. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I know I went over time. I didn't mean to take so long. Thank you for listening." She started to turn away, ready to leave, convinced that she had failed. She had no idea that the three people sitting in front of her were still trying to process what they had just witnessed. She had no idea that Vincent Lawson, the man who had dismissed her before she even opened her mouth, was now looking at her like she had just performed a miracle. "Wait," Vincent said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Wait, don't go." Rosalie stopped. She turned back slowly, confusion written all over her face. She looked like someone who was used to being told no, someone who had learned to expect disappointment. The fact that she wasn't already out the door seemed to surprise her. Vincent didn't know what to say. For 17 years, he had always known exactly what to say. He had a speech for the talented ones, and a speech for the ones who needed to find another dream. But he had no speech for this. He had no words for the feeling that was rising in his chest, a mixture of awe and shame and something he couldn't quite name. He looked at this woman standing before him. This woman he had judged and dismissed in the span of 3 seconds. And he realized something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He had almost missed her. He had almost let her walk out that door without a second glance. And if he had, the world would have lost something extraordinary without ever knowing it existed. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers, and asked the only question that mattered. "Where have you been hiding?" Rosalie didn't answer right away. She stood there, under the harsh fluorescent lights, looking at Vincent like he had just spoken to her in a foreign language. The question hung in the air between them, heavy and real. "Where have you been hiding?" It was such a simple question, but the weight of it seemed to press down on her shoulders. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and for a moment, Vincent thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just stood there, quiet, like someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to hold everything inside. The young assistant coach was the first to break the silence. She pushed back her chair and stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The tears on her face said everything. Vincent rose slowly from his seat. His legs felt strange beneath him, like he had just woken up from a long sleep. He walked around the table and approached Rosalie carefully, the way you might approach a wild animal that could bolt at any moment. "That song," he said quietly. "Where did you learn it?" Rosalie looked up at him. Her eyes were dark brown, deep and tired. But there was something else in them now. A flicker of something that might have been hope, though she seemed afraid to let it show. "My grandmother," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "She used to sing it to me when I was little. Back home, before we moved to the city. She said her mother taught it to her. And her mother before that. I don't even know how old it is." Vincent nodded slowly. He had suspected something like that. The song had the feel of something ancient, something that had been polished smooth by generations of voices before hers. But the way she sang it, the way she made it her own, that was something no one could teach. "Have you had any training?" he asked. "Voice lessons? Choir? Anything?" Rosalie shook her head. "No, sir. Nothing like that. I just sing sometimes. At home, mostly. When I'm alone." The words hit Vincent harder than he expected. At home, when I'm alone. This woman had a voice that could fill concert halls, and she had been hiding it in her kitchen, singing to no one. Why? He asked. The question came out before he could stop it. Why haven't you done anything with this? You could have. You should have. He trailed off, not knowing how to finish. Rosalie looked away, and this time, he saw something close to pain cross her face. It was there for just a second before she pushed it down, hiding it behind that quiet mask she wore so well. Life got in the way, she said simply. It does that sometimes. Vincent wanted to ask more. He wanted to know everything about her. About where she came from. About what had happened to her. About why the world had never heard this voice before. But something in her expression told him to wait. There was a story there, a long one. And she wasn't ready to tell it yet. He turned to look at his fellow coaches. The veteran was still sitting in his chair, shaking his head slowly, like he couldn't quite believe what he had just witnessed. When he caught Vincent's eye, he gave a small nod. They had worked together long enough to communicate without words. That nod meant only one thing. Don't let this one go. Vincent turned back to Rosalie. She was already gathering her things, getting ready to leave. She moved like someone who expected nothing, someone who had learned that doors usually closed in her face. It made something twist painfully in Vincent's chest. Wait, he said again. Please. Rosalie paused, her hand on the strap of her worn canvas bag. She looked at him with cautious eyes. Waiting. I want to offer you a place in our program, Vincent said. Full scholarship. You wouldn't have to pay a thing. I would work with you personally. We could start next week. Or whenever you're ready. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. Vincent barely recognized himself. He was not the kind of man who made offers like this on the spot. He was careful, methodical, always thinking 3 steps ahead, but something about this woman, something about that voice, had thrown all his careful rules out the window. Rosalie stared at him. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then she laughed. It was a short, sad sound, nothing like the beauty that had come from her when she sang. You're joking, she said. I'm not. You don't even know me. I know enough. She shook her head, backing away slightly. No. No. You don't. You don't know anything about me. You don't know where I come from. What my life is like. What I've... She stopped herself, pressing her lips together hard. Vincent took a step closer. Then tell me. The room was completely silent. The 2 assistant coaches sat frozen at their table, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever was happening between these 2 people. Rosalie looked at Vincent for a long time. He could see the war happening behind her eyes, the push and pull of fear and hope, of wanting to believe and being terrified to try. He recognized that look. He had seen it before, in other singers, other dreamers who had been beaten down by life until they forgot they had wings. I have 2 children, she said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. A boy and a girl. 12 and 9. I work nights at a hospital. Not as a nurse or anything like that. I work in the laundry department. Sheets, towels, gowns, 12-hour shifts, sometimes more. I get home at 6 in the morning, make breakfast, get the kids off to school, sleep for a few hours, then start all over again. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I don't have time for dreams. I don't have money for lessons. I don't have anyone to watch my kids while I go chasing something that probably won't work out anyway. I came here today because... She stopped. And this time, a tear did slip down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. I came here because my daughter made me. Vincent frowned. Your daughter? Rosalie nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was different from the lyrics sheet she had been holding before. This one was written in a child's handwriting, the letters careful and uneven. She recorded me singing one night. Rosalie said. I didn't even know she was there. She sent in the application herself. Wrote the letter. Everything. She didn't tell me until last week when the confirmation came. She looked down at the paper in her hands. She told me I sounded like an angel. She said someone should know. Vincent felt something crack open inside him. He thought about his own life, the years he had spent chasing success, the sacrifices he had made, the people he had stepped over to get where he was, and here was this woman, working herself to the bone every single night, raising 2 children alone, and she had a gift that most people would kill for, a gift she had never even tried to use, because life got in the way. He thought about all the talent he had seen over the years, all the voices that had come through these doors. Some of them had made it, most of them hadn't, but none of them, not a single one, had ever moved him the way this woman just had. He made a decision in that moment. It wasn't logical. It wasn't practical. It was probably one of the most reckless things he had ever done in his career. But he didn't care. "I'm going to help you," he said. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to help you share that voice with the world." Rosalie looked at him, her eyes wet, her hands trembling around that crumpled letter from her daughter. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for someone like me?" Vincent smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt real. Because someone should know. The first few weeks were harder than either of them expected. Vincent had rearranged his entire schedule to accommodate Rosalie's impossible life. They met twice a week, late in the evening after she had picked up her children from their after-school program and dropped them off with her elderly neighbor. She would arrive at the academy exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, still smelling faintly of hospital detergent. And somehow, despite all of that, she would sing. But something was wrong. The magic Vincent had heard in that audition room seemed to disappear the moment formal training began. Rosalie's voice was still beautiful, still technically impressive, but the soul was gone. She sang like someone following instructions, hitting the right notes at the right times, doing everything correctly. And it was killing him. "Stop," Vincent said one evening, holding up his hand. They were in one of the smaller practice rooms. Just the two of them, and an old piano. Rosalie stood by the window, a sheet of music in her hands, looking like she wanted to disappear into the wall. "What am I doing wrong?" she asked. Her voice was small, defeated. Vincent sighed and rubbed his eyes. He had been doing this for nearly 2 decades, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. Most singers struggled with technique. They had the passion but lacked the control. Rosalie was the opposite. She had all the control in the world, but somewhere along the way, she had learned to lock her heart away where no one could reach it. "You're not doing anything wrong," he said carefully. "That's the problem. You're doing everything right. Too right. You're singing from here." He tapped his head. "But that day, in the audition, you were singing from here." He placed his hand over his heart. Rosalie looked away. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." The silence stretched between them. Outside the window, the city was coming alive with evening lights. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Life went on. Indifferent to the small drama unfolding in this room. "I can't," Rosalie said finally. Her voice cracked on the words. "I can't sing like that anymore. Not on purpose. That day was different. I didn't think anyone was really listening. I forgot where I was. I forgot to be afraid." Vincent leaned forward. "Afraid of what?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, clutching that sheet of music like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And suddenly, Vincent understood something he should have realized from the beginning. This wasn't about singing. This was about survival. He stood up slowly and walked over to the piano. He sat down on the bench and let his fingers rest on the keys without pressing them. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler than before. "Tell me about your grandmother." Rosalie looked at him, surprised. "My grandmother? The one who taught you that song? Tell me about her." For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. But then something in her face softened, just a little, and she began to speak. "She was the strongest person I ever knew," Rosalie said quietly. She raised 7 children on her own after my grandfather died. Worked 2 jobs. Never complained. Never asked for help. She had this voice, not like mine, but beautiful in its own way. She would sing while she cooked, while she cleaned, while she hung laundry on the line. She said singing was the only thing that was truly free in this world. Nobody could take it from you. Vincent nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. When I was little, I would sit at her feet and listen to her for hours. She taught me all the old songs, the ones her mother had taught her. She said I had a gift. She said I should share it with the world someday. Rosalie's voice wavered. She died when I was 16. I never got to say goodbye. I'm sorry, Vincent said softly. Rosalie shook her head. After she was gone, everything changed. My mother moved us to the city for work. I met a man. I was young, stupid, thought I was in love. She laughed bitterly. He was charming at first. They always are, aren't they? Told me I was beautiful. Told me I was special. Then we got married, and the truth came out. Vincent stayed very still, listening. He didn't like my singing, Rosalie continued. Her voice had gone flat now, mechanical, like she was reciting facts about someone else's life. He said it was annoying. He said I was showing off. He said nobody wanted to hear me. That I sounded like a dying cat. Every time I opened my mouth, he found a way to make me feel small. So I stopped. I stopped singing, stopped dreaming, stopped everything. I just focused on surviving. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. The children came. And for a while, I thought maybe things would get better. But they didn't. He got worse. More controlling. More cruel. Not with his hands, but with his words. Words can cut deeper than anything. You know, they leave scars you can't see. Vincent felt a cold anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. How did you get out? My daughter, Rosalie said. And for the first time, a small smile crossed her face. She was only 5 years old. But she looked at me one day and asked why I was always sad, and I realized that if I stayed, she would grow up thinking that was normal. She would think that was what love looked like. I couldn't let that happen. So I left. Took the kids in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on our backs. Started over from zero. She looked at Vincent directly now, and he saw the strength that had been hiding beneath all that exhaustion and fear. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of working every job I could find, of saying no to everything I wanted, so my kids could have what they needed. 7 years of telling myself that dreams were for other people, not for someone like me. She took a shaky breath. And then my daughter recorded me singing. And she sent that letter. And she looked at me with those big eyes and said, Mom, you sound like an angel. Someone should know. Tears were falling freely down her face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. She believes in me, Rosalie whispered. She believes in me more than I have ever believed in myself. And I don't know how to live up to that. I don't know how to be the person she thinks I am. Vincent stood up from the piano bench. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough to see the pain and hope warring in her eyes. You already are that person, he said quietly. You just forgot. Someone spent years telling you that you were nothing, and you believed him because you didn't have anyone telling you different. But he was wrong. He was so wrong. And I'm going to spend every day proving that to you until you believe it yourself. Rosalie looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. The walls she had built so carefully over all those years seemed to tremble, just for a moment. What if I fail? She asked. What if I'm not good enough? What if I let everyone down? Vincent smiled, and there was something fierce in it, something protective. Then we fail together, he said. But I don't think we will. I heard you sing, remember? I heard what you're capable of when you forget to be afraid, and I'm going to help you find that again. Not for me, not for the world. For you. And for that little girl who already knows what the rest of us are just figuring out. Rosalie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, something had changed. The fear was still there. But so was something else now. Determination. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Let's try again. Vincent nodded and returned to the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play the opening notes of her grandmother's song. This time, when Rosalie opened her mouth to sing, she didn't hold back. And this time, Vincent heard the angel again. The months that followed were the hardest of Rosalie's life. And that was saying something, because her life had never been easy. Training with Vincent was nothing like she had imagined. She thought it would be about scales and breathing exercises and learning to hit high notes. And yes, there was some of that. But mostly, it was about something much deeper. It was about unlearning all the lies she had been told. It was about finding the woman she used to be before the world had beaten her down. Some days were good. She would walk into the practice room, open her mouth, and the music would pour out of her like water from a broken dam. On those days, Vincent would sit at the piano with tears in his eyes, shaking his head in wonder. On those days, she almost believed she could do this. But other days were bad, really bad. There were nights when she would come to practice after a brutal shift at the hospital, her body aching, her mind foggy with exhaustion. She would stand in front of the microphone and nothing would come out, just silence, just emptiness. On those nights, the old voices would creep back in. The voice of her ex-husband telling her she was worthless. The voice of her own fear telling her she was foolish to even try. 3 months into her training, she almost quit. It happened on a Thursday night. Her son had gotten into trouble at school for fighting with another boy. Her daughter had come down with a fever and needed to stay home. The neighbor who usually watched them had hurt her back and couldn't help anymore. And on top of all that, her supervisor at the hospital had called her in for an extra shift because 2 other workers had quit without notice. Rosalie stood in Vincent's practice room that night. But she couldn't sing. She couldn't even speak. She just stood there, shaking, feeling like the walls were closing in around her. "I can't do this," she finally said. Her voice was hollow, defeated. "I don't know what I was thinking. I have 2 kids who need me. I have bills to pay. I have a real life, with real responsibilities. This was a mistake. All of it." Vincent didn't argue with her. He didn't try to convince her she was wrong. He just sat quietly at the piano, watching her, waiting. "I'm sorry," Rosalie continued, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry for wasting your time. You believed in me, and I let you down, but I can't keep pretending I'm something I'm not. I'm not a singer. I'm not special. I'm just a tired woman who works in a laundry room and can barely keep her head above water." She turned toward the door, ready to walk out and never come back. "Your daughter called me yesterday," Vincent said quietly. Rosalie stopped. She turned around slowly. "What?" "She found the academy's number online. Called the front desk and asked to speak to me. Very polite. Very determined. Reminded me of someone." A small smile crossed his face. "She wanted to know if you were doing okay. She said you've been crying at night when you think the kids are asleep. She said she's worried about you." Rosalie felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "She called you?" Vincent nodded. "She also told me something else. She said that ever since you started coming here, you've been different. Not in a bad way. She said you smile more. She said you hum while you make breakfast now, like you used to do when she was little. She said her brother noticed it too." Rosalie's hand went to her mouth. She hadn't realized. She hadn't known they were watching so closely. "She asked me to make you a promise," Vincent continued. "She asked me not to let you give up. She said her mom has spent her whole life giving up her dreams for everyone else. And she doesn't want her to do it anymore. She said." He paused, and Rosalie saw something shift in his expression. Something raw and real. "She said she wants to grow up to be just like you, but she wants to see you be happy first." The tears came then, hot and fast, streaming down Rosalie's face. She didn't try to stop them. She couldn't have, even if she wanted to. That night, she didn't quit. She stayed. She sang. And something inside her changed forever. After that, Things were different. The struggle didn't go away. The exhaustion didn't disappear. But Rosalie stopped fighting alone. Vincent helped her find a new neighbor who could watch the children for a few hours in the evenings. The academy arranged for a small stipend to help cover some of her expenses. And slowly, painfully, one day at a time, she began to believe that maybe this dream wasn't so impossible after all. Her voice grew stronger. Not just technically, but emotionally. She learned to channel all those years of pain and struggle into her music. She learned that her scars weren't weaknesses to hide. They were the source of her power. They were the reason her voice could touch people in ways that others couldn't. Vincent pushed her hard, harder than he had ever pushed any student. He made her sing until her throat ached. He made her perform in front of small audiences at the academy, getting her used to the feeling of being watched. He made her face every fear, every doubt, every insecurity head-on. And through it all, her children were watching. Her daughter would sit in the back of the practice room sometimes, doing her homework while her mother sang. Her son, who at first had been embarrassed by all of this, slowly began to change. He started telling his friends about his mom, the singer. He started asking her to sing at home, something he hadn't done in years. One evening, about 8 months into her training, Rosalie was practicing a new song. It was an emotional piece, something about finding hope after loss. She was so focused on getting it right that she didn't notice her son standing in the doorway. When she finished, she heard clapping. She turned around to see him standing there, his 12-year-old face trying very hard to look cool and unaffected. But his eyes were wet. "That was pretty good, Mom," he said, his voice gruff. "I mean, whatever, it's fine." Rosalie laughed through her tears and pulled him into a hug. He pretended to resist, but he didn't pull away. That night, for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The final test came 10 months after her audition. Vincent told her about a national singing competition that was looking for undiscovered talent. The auditions were being held in the city, and the winners would perform on live television in front of millions of people. "You're ready," he said simply. Rosalie felt the old fear rise up in her chest. Television, millions of people, judges who would pick apart every note, every breath, every tiny mistake. It was everything she had been afraid of her entire life. But then she thought about her daughter, who had believed in her before anyone else. She thought about her son, standing in that doorway with tears in his eyes. She thought about her grandmother, who had told her that singing was the one thing nobody could ever take away. And she thought about herself, the woman who had survived so much, who had kept going when everything told her to stop, who had finally learned to believe that she was worth something. "Okay," she said, and her voice was steady. "Let's do it." Vincent smiled, and there was pride in his eyes, real pride. The kind that comes from watching someone become the person they were always meant to be. "One more thing," he said. "The competition has a theme this year. They want each singer to perform a song that tells their story, something personal, something true." Rosalie nodded slowly. She already knew what she would sing. She had known from the very beginning. Her grandmother's song. The one that had started everything. The one that had brought her here. She was finally ready to share it with the world. The day of the competition arrived faster than Rosalie was ready for. She stood backstage in a small dressing room, staring at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was almost unrecognizable. Her hair had been styled by a professional for the first time in her life. She wore a simple but elegant dark blue dress that Vincent's wife had helped her pick out. Her makeup was subtle, just enough to make her features stand out under the bright stage lights. But underneath all of that, she was still the same person. Still the woman who had spent years folding hospital sheets in the middle of the night. Still the mother who had made countless sacrifices so her children could have a better life. Still the girl who used to sit at her grandmother's feet and listen to songs that had been passed down through generations. Her hands were shaking. They hadn't stopped shaking since she woke up that morning. A soft knock came at the door. Before she could answer, it opened, and 2 small figures rushed in, her children. Her daughter reached her first, throwing her arms around her waist and holding on tight. Her son hung back for a moment, trying to play it cool the way 13-year-old boys do. But then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a long moment, the 3 of them just stood there, holding each other. "You're going to be amazing, Mom," her daughter whispered. "I know it. We'll be right there in the front row," her son added. His voice cracked slightly, the way it had been doing lately as he grew older. "The whole time. We're not going anywhere." Rosalie pulled back and looked at them. Really looked at them. Her daughter with her bright, hopeful eyes. Her son trying so hard to be strong for her. These two human beings who had given her the courage to try when she had forgotten how. "I love you both so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens out there tonight, I need you to know that. You are the best thing I ever did. The only thing that ever really mattered." Her daughter smiled. That same smile she had worn the day she handed over that crumpled application letter. "We know, Mom. Now go show everyone what we already know." A few minutes later, Vincent appeared in the doorway. He looked different tonight too, wearing a suit instead of his usual casual clothes. His expression was calm, but Rosalie could see the tension in his shoulders. He was nervous for her, maybe almost as nervous as she was. "It's time," he said quietly. Rosalie took a deep breath. She hugged her children one more time, then followed Vincent down the long corridor toward the stage. The auditorium was massive, bigger than anything she had ever seen in her life. Thousands of seats stretched out into the darkness, and every single one of them was filled. Cameras were positioned throughout the space, ready to broadcast her performance to millions of people watching at home. A panel of 4 judges sat at a long table near the front, their faces serious and unreadable. Rosalie felt her legs turn to water. For one terrible moment, she was sure she couldn't do it. She was going to freeze, forget the words, make a fool of herself in front of the entire country. Every insecurity she had ever felt came rushing back at once, threatening to drown her. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Vincent standing beside her, his eyes locked on hers. "Remember who you are," he said softly. "Remember why you're here. Not for them, not for the judges, not for the cameras. For yourself. For your grandmother. For those 2 kids sitting in the front row who already think you hung the moon." Rosalie nodded. She closed her eyes and took one more deep breath. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The fear was still there, but it was smaller now, quieter, pushed aside by something stronger. She walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see the audience, couldn't see anything except a wall of white brightness. But she could feel them out there. Thousands of people, all waiting to see what she would do. A host in a shiny suit introduced her, reading from a card. He mentioned that she was a single mother, that she worked nights at a hospital, that she had never had any formal training until a year ago. The audience murmured with interest. The underdog story. Everyone loved an underdog. But Rosalie wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about a small kitchen in a house that no longer existed, where an old woman with weathered hands and a gentle voice had taught a little girl how to sing. The music began. Soft piano notes. Simple and pure. The arrangement Vincent had created for her grandmother's song. And then Rosalie opened her mouth, and she sang. The first note silenced the room. Every whisper, every shuffle, every tiny sound disappeared. There was only her voice, rising up into the darkness, like a prayer. She sang about love and loss, about holding on and letting go, about the women who had come before her, who had carried this song across generations like a precious flame that must never go out. She sang about her grandmother, about her mother, about her daughter. She sang about every night she had spent crying in the dark, and every morning she had forced herself to get up and keep going. She sang about being told she was nothing, and finally learning that she was something after all. Somewhere in the middle of the song, she found her children in the audience. Her daughter was crying openly, tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed over her heart. Her son was trying not to cry, his jaw clenched tight, but his eyes were shining. Rosalie felt her own tears come, but she didn't stop. She let them fall. She let everything fall away except the music, except the truth, except this moment that she had waited her entire life to experience. When the final note faded into silence, she stood there, trembling, emptied out, feeling more alive than she had ever felt before. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the audience exploded. People rose to their feet, thousands of them, all at once. The applause was deafening, rolling over her like a wave. People were cheering, whistling, crying. Even the judges were standing. Their professional composure completely shattered. Rosalie couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She just stood there, overwhelmed, watching this sea of strangers respond to something that had come from the deepest part of her soul. Backstage, Vincent was wiping his eyes. He didn't care who saw. He had been doing this for nearly 20 years, and he had never witnessed anything like what had just happened. The results came later that night. Rosalie didn't win first place. That honor went to a young man with a powerful voice and years of professional training behind him. But she won something else. Second place came with a recording contract, an opportunity to share her music with the world. More importantly, she won something that no trophy could ever represent. She won her voice back. She won her belief in herself. She won the right to stand tall and say, "I am here, and I matter." After the show, reporters wanted to interview her. They asked about her journey, her struggles, her children. They asked what she would say to other women out there who had given up on their dreams. Rosalie thought about it for a moment. She thought about all the years she had spent in silence, all the years she had believed the lies, all the years she had waited for someone to give her permission to shine. Then she looked directly into the camera and spoke. "It's never too late," she said simply. "I know it feels like it is. I know life gets hard and dreams feel foolish. And there's always a reason to wait for someday. But someday doesn't come unless you make it come. So if there's something inside you, something you've been hiding, something you've been afraid to share, don't wait any longer. The world needs your voice. Even if you don't believe it yet, someone out there already does." She paused, and a small smile crossed her face. Someone should know. And somewhere in that audience, watching with tears in her eyes, a 12-year-old girl smiled too. Because she had known all along.